Hi guys, so let's talk about transactional writing, sometimes called persuasive writing. Every single exam board has a version of it. Sometimes it's worth 40 marks, sometimes it's worth 45 marks. And generally, what people find difficult about this is that it's very different to the creative writing parts of the language exams, because creative writing gives you an opportunity to kind of be creative, be interesting, tell a story, describe a picture, whatever you choose. And then when they get to the non-fiction part of the writing, things can sometimes get a little bit boring. You've got to manage statistics and facts and stuff like that. And people generally find that their writing's a little bit boring. And trust me, marking a lot of them, yes, they do get very, very boring. So in this video, I'm going to run through what I teach all my students in terms of how to make the writing more interesting, how to plan effectively, and breaking down the format, how each particular element of form should be presented. So whether it's a letter, speech, article, how to make them stand out, how to make them look really, really good and get loads of marks. So jumping right in, I think the first thing to think about is, what is the purpose of this question? What is the examiner actually trying to see that you can do? And it is to write for a particular purpose, in a particular format, for a particular audience. Those are the three sort of elements that are being tested here. Can you write for a purpose? Can you write in the right format? And do you address the audience, the particular audience you're given, correctly? That's generally formal or informal. And the options that you could get are, number one, the article for a magazine or website, article for a newspaper, a speech that could be either to your peers, so people at your level, at your sort of status, like people at a school, a speech to an adult audience, and then there's a leaflet, a letter to an adult reader, and then potentially you could technically have a letter to a friend. Now, if you're doing AQA, the ones in red, leaflet and friend, letter to a friend, have literally never been done before, which is why I put them in red. Technically, they could be done. Technically. I'm actually quite surprised AQA have never done the leaflet, because lots of other exam boards have. For some reason, AQA haven't. But technically, it's there. And what I've written here in bold is kind of like, what could the purpose be? So for example, from the top, an article for a magazine or a website, it's going to be more of an informal piece of writing. Now, depending on the subject matter, that could either be writing to entertain your reader, potentially. Often with the magazine articles, they tend to have slightly lighter topics, but not all the time. If they give you a really dark subject matter, not that they would, but imagine if they did, like writing about poverty, for example, it's quite hard to make that entertaining. And I probably would recommend don't try and make that entertaining. But often with the magazine, because it's more informal, they tend to be lighter subject matters. So I've put the purpose there as a potential to entertain. And notice at the end of each one, I've written the word inform. Whether it's the articles for newspapers or letters, whatever, it always says inform, because that's the purpose of the writing, to inform the reader of something. So moving on to the newspaper, that's where it changes a little bit, because that's going to become way more formal, much more formal than the magazine article. And for that, I've put the purpose to educate the reader. Because if you think of someone who reads a newspaper, like in the real world, they're reading that newspaper because they want the articles to go into detail. They want to sort of be educated on the topic. And it's a more formal piece of writing. So I think I've put my purposes to educate there. Speeches, they follow the same, whether they are to peers or to an adult audience. Obviously, the peers is going to be way more informal. That's normally to like your class or your school, classmates, however they might phrase it. Again, to inform, obviously. And this one I've said to present judgment and to convince others. And I think often the way the questions are laid out, you're always going to be presenting a judgment on a statement or the topic that they give you. I think the convince others is quite important in a speech, because it's often you're talking in order to get people on side for your point of view. potentially, mostly. So for the speech, I've put convince others. I think that's quite important. Same with the outer audience, literally the same. It'd just be a bit more formal if it was to like the Houses of Parliament or maybe teachers and staff. That would be more formal. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to maybe do more formal writing in a moment. And then lastly, the letter. As I say, friends never come up. So it's generally in the past always been to an adult reader. That's obviously formal, and the purpose is to inform. And I've put to convince others. Now, here's the thing, I think, with letter writing to get in your head, because all of you will probably have done some speech writing as part of your spoken endorsement part of the exam, the pass merit distinction test that you have to do. So everyone's mostly written a speech. The letter is basically the same as a speech. It's just to one person. Think of it like that. So everything that you have kind of been taught about how to present a speech, apply that to a letter. It's just to one person. That's the only real difference. So I've made it the same as the speech, which is to convince others. So my next section of this document is all about what are the different presentations of form. And what I mean by form is it a letter? Does it take the form of a speech? Does it take the form of an article? That's what I mean by form. And every single one will have like different quirks to it, like it will have a different way of laying it out. So the magazine article first, I've put title. You should definitely have a title for a magazine article. Subheadings, so that would be where you are dividing up your paragraphs into a little mini title or a subheading where you're going to introduce what you're about to talk about in that paragraph. I've put 4 because for a magazine article you might want somewhere in the region of 4 subheadings to break up the text nicely, because with a magazine article you don't want it to get too heavy. You want it to really have short, broken up information. Alliteration in titles, I think, is a really nice touch in the subheadings and in the title, because it's supposed to be lighter. It's supposed to be a bit more engaging to read, maybe a bit more fun to read. So alliteration in the titles and subheadings can make it come to life a little bit more. Shorter paragraphs is important. I'm comparing it to the newspaper article, which is going to have longer paragraphs. A magazine article is going to have shorter ones because it needs to stay light. It doesn't want to get too heavy. Your purpose is not to educate. It may be to entertain, and you don't want it to get too heavy and detailed, really. Lighter language. So this is what I was going to talk about in terms of like how do you make something more informal? If it's going to be more informal, lighter language is good. For example, jokes, maybe, like humor is really, really tricky, especially if you're writing humor. Like it might not land and you want to play it safe probably. But just using slightly lighter language is like language techniques, maybe like more figurative language, maybe puns, maybe some irony, stuff like that. Anecdotes are really good. So an anecdote is a personal story that you might tell about yourself in your piece. I actually recommend you do that regardless of whether it's magazine, newspaper, speech, leaflet or letter. I'll come on to that in a bit. Language techniques can work in magazine articles too. Facts and statistics and quotes. These are absolutely critical because it's a piece of non-fiction writing. It's a piece of informative writing. So you need to be putting into the magazine article facts on the topic that you're talking about, maybe statistics, and using quotes as well. So who should the quotes be from? Well, if it's a magazine article, I've put quotes either from the general public and maybe like celebrities, because if you compare it again to the newspaper article is probably going to be experts. It's going to be like MPs, members of parliament, professors, maybe doctors or whatever, because these are people who you would expect to see in a newspaper because you're there to be educated on the topic. Remember what we said about the purpose of a newspaper article is to educate. Whereas with the magazine article, it's a bit lighter. So you don't really need to hear from the Prime Minister. You might be more interested just to hear what Joe thought about, in the gym or whatever, or celebrities, what maybe an influencer said or something like that. So it's got to feel real. All of these different presentation of form ideas are all about how do you make this piece of writing feel real. So moving on to the newspaper article, still title, still subheadings, because you want to show that you understand the formats, that you understand it shouldn't just be one big paragraph, which is what a lot of people do actually. You want it to have breaks and subheading to make those breaks like flow a bit. But I've put 1 to 2 on the subheadings for a newspaper article because your paragraphs are going to be longer. Why are they going to be longer? Because you're going into more detail. Your job is to educate the readers. So you're going to be going into a bit more detail into your paragraph. So fewer subheadings. Denser language. So going into more depth, probably like longer sentences is probably where you're going to be thinking of going into depth and making like deeper points. No language techniques. I go back and forth on this idea of whether you should put language techniques in every format. I kind of think you do, but you've got to be careful with it. The reason I think you want to put language techniques in it is because you're getting marked on like your use of language. So language techniques can just help you get marks. So I think with the newspaper article, you just got to be careful with the language techniques you use. Probably more complex ones like a metaphor. I'd probably leave like the similes, particularly if they're kind of light-hearted similes, to more of like the magazine or maybe the speech to peers. So you just want to be a little bit careful with the language techniques that you use on a piece of formal writing. So I've said longer sentences because you're going into more depth, facts and statistics and quotes. As always, you'll see that on all of these different ways of laying out the form. And here, as I said earlier, professors, MPs, experts, because the reader wants to be educated on the topic. Speech. The layout is pretty straightforward. No need for a title, no need for subheadings. Your paragraph lengths are going to be kind of sort of average. What does that mean? Well, probably somewhere like 200 words, maybe 150 words for a paragraph. You're going to want to lay out 2 to 3 main topics, like as your body paragraphs. You want to have one concluding paragraph. That's really important. AQA have put that in like their examiner's report, that they want a clear introduction, a development of your point. So an introduction possibly, and definitely a conclusion. Facts and statistics, of course. And I've put here as well, maybe you could end or start your speech with a famous quote. Don't worry, you don't need to learn famous quotes. You can just make it up. So you could like have Barack Obama, I don't know, Boris Johnson or whoever, a public figure, let's say, and just make up a speech, make up a quote that they said. Just make it up. Simple sentences can be used for effect. I mean, that goes for any, really. Simple sentences are great to make your point really short, snappy, punchy, which is what you want when you're writing informatively. Direct address, obviously in a speech, is really important. So referring to the audience around you, like you or we collectively need to make a change or whatever. And rhetorical questions are great with speech writing. Again, you've probably learnt this because you will at this point potentially have done your year 10 or year 11 public speaking like endorsement for GCSE English. Leaflet, as I say, AQA have never done it, but loads of other exam boards have. Yes, you want a title. It's kind of like a magazine article, but with smaller paragraphs. Subheadings, I've put 4 to 6. 6 might be a bit much. 4 to 5, I think, would probably be fine. Alliteration titles, again, very similar to the magazine article. Shorter paragraphs. Facts, of course, statistics. Maybe instead of quotes for a leaflet, you might put reviews. A leaflet, your goal is to kind of sell something. What have I put here as the leaflet? To inspire. Yeah, so to inspire people to visit the library or whatever. They often do like leaflets on your local library wants to encourage more reading. Write the text for a leaflet. So I think it's to inspire on that one. And then finally, a letter. Really tricky one, but actually I've kind of got a way where you can actually not have to think too hard about how to lay out a letter. You need an address, just make it up. And there are 2 forms that really should appear in a letter. The introduction to whoever you're talking to and how you end it. Now, people get confused between yours faithfully and yours sincerely, generally. So I've got a rule which makes it really, really simple, which is if you start your letter with "to whom it may concern," because you haven't named anyone in the letter, it's not addressed to anyone in particular, you have to end it "yours faithfully." You would only use "yours sincerely" if you had named someone, like "Dear Mr. Jones" or whatever. So in order to stop yourself second guessing yourself on exam day, never ever put someone's name. Just put "to whom it may concern." Number one, that's more impressive to an examiner that you know that layout of that phrasing. And secondly, it makes it really easy. You'll just learn that you will always say "yours faithfully" and you're all good. So I really recommend using those phrases. They're really useful. Yours and their address, I would recommend your address in the top right hand corner. Then on the left hand side, just below that, their address with the date as well. To whom it may concern. Average paragraph lengths, kind of similar to the speech. Remember, letter is basically just a speech, but to one person. No language techniques. I think it'd be weird to put language techniques in a letter. One way round that is, when you have to do quotes, like quotes from someone you've interviewed on the topic, a quote from an expert or someone, you could put a technique in there. So you could have the Prime Minister put a quote in there and have the Prime Minister use a technique like a simile or something, and then that feels a little bit more plausible, a bit more realistic. So I would recommend that, to put your language techniques in, put them in quotes. Facts, statistics, obviously, and yours faithfully to end it. Now, this is the most important bit, actually, how to make transactional writing interesting. I mean, over 10 years, nearly 15 years, I've read a lot of these, and I've read some really, really, really boring ones. So here are, I think it's 5 or 6 tips to really make it interesting. Number one, have a clear objective. Now, what I mean by that is something that you want to achieve, something beyond just what the statement is or what the question is that they've given you. And I'll go through an example. And you want to make sure that you take actions throughout your paragraphs to achieve your objective, and you just make up the objective. The examiner will never give you an objective. You can come up with it yourself. And the more interesting your objective, the more interesting your writing is going to be. So here is an example. Imagine if you got a question, which is actually a past paper question. Write an article on the harm of climate change. I've shortened that down, but if it was an article and it was about harm of climate change, most people are going to write a piece of persuasive writing about why climate change is bad and things that we can do to improve climate change. Now, if you add in an objective, immediately it's going to lift this sort of whole topic, because in this example I've put, my objective is to make the readers disgusted by the inaction of governments on climate change. I'm still talking about climate change, but now I'm adding a whole new angle to it. This idea that I want the readers to feel the disgust I feel towards governments. Still about climate change, but now a completely different and unique angle to everyone else. And you can always kind of come up with interesting objectives, something that you want the reader to feel. I want them to feel disgusted, or I want them to feel worried or shocked. I want them to feel happy, whatever it might be. Choose an interesting objective and then try and gain that objective every single paragraph, and it makes the writing so much more interesting. Number 2, break up facts and detail with language techniques. For example, let's say I had the statistic that 89% of people joined our protest. This is still on the climate change idea. Now look at my next bit. We were like a tsunami on the Houses of Parliament, a powerful force sweeping away inaction, cleansing the filth of government ignorance. So just think of what I've done there. I've taken a boring statistic and then I've flooded it, made it more interesting with putting techniques in there. The simile, like a tsunami, a powerful force, metaphor, cleansing the filth of government inaction, hyperbole. Loads of techniques in there, but it's connected to the statistic. So it still puts across that idea of being informative writing. Number 3, structural choices to make information pop. An example: the government are wrong. The government are wasting our planet. The government needs change. So here I've used anaphora, which is the government are. If you notice, it's 3 times. The government are, and then the government are, and then the government needs. Anaphora, tricolon, because there's 3 statements across 3 different simple sentences. Loads of techniques in there. That's what you're going to be getting the marks for. Number 4, have a clear call to action. So I want you, reader, to do this. I want you to think about this. I want you to go home. I want you to write a letter to your MP, something like that. And you want it to be connected to your original objective that you came up with. So end your piece with the strongest and clearest possible message. This is where you deliver your objective in the clearest possible terms. I want you to join our protest next week. Oh, let's have a look. My example. Next week, we'll be scheduling a new protest and are looking for new members to join us. Please get in touch at student@governmentinaction.com to find out how you can make a difference! Think of that creativity that you're showing the examiner, making up an email address, making it really clear what you want from the reader. I want you to join the protest. This kind of stuff makes it so much more interesting to read, because the examiner and the reader, suddenly I'm like brought into this world. It's like you're creating an imaginary world of context where you are fighting for government change. Now I'm really inspired to carry on reading. What I normally get is really uninspiring information that a student is writing, and it gets really, really boring. So this kind of stuff makes it interesting. Now, number 5 is, I think, really, this is a game changer. In the example I'm going to read in a moment from one of my past students, you can see how she's used a story really well. What I mean by coming up with a story is that you can either use an anecdote, which is a personal story, something that you yourself have experienced, but you can make it up, or using like a case study, like someone made up who's been affected by whatever the topic is. So an anecdote would be personal, or a made up case study of someone who's been affected. Because think about the word affected. If I've been affected by it, or if someone else has been affected by it, suddenly there's an emotion attached to it, and then you can convey that emotion through your writing. Now, the whole thing is not going to be a story. I'm talking about one paragraph in your writing where you can go into a bit of descriptive writing, because most people are quite good at descriptive writing and confident with descriptive writing. So we can bring that into our non-fiction piece of writing too. So here's an example. I remember when I joined my first protest. It was an icy, cold winter's day, but I felt the warmth of our metaphor, melt through the frosty government inaction. I remember the feeling of pride at making a difference, and my heart leapt when I saw the Prime Minister read our signs. My heart leapt, again, metaphor, personification. So during this piece of descriptive writing, and I would recommend doing more than that, like actually a paragraph, you can go into the emotion of you or someone else. And suddenly, again, that makes it way, way, way more interesting. It's more interesting to read about emotions than just facts and statistics. Make up statistics to support your point. So yeah, just make this up. Make up the statistics. A lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, but what if I don't know any? Just make them up. Make them up. The examiner doesn't care. It is kind of, plus they won't know, but also it also does have a creative writing element to it, or it should. So when you come up with a point to talk about on the topic you've been given, ask yourself, what statistic or fact would give the point more impact? So that's what you want to do. You want to think, okay, what statistic would make this really land in quite a hard-hitting way? And then just make it up. Do make them realistic though. I mean, sometimes I've had people like come up with some absolutely bizarre statistics that just kind of like breaks the immersion for the reader. You know, it makes us, the examiners, feel like, okay, we've gone out of reality here. You know, keep it grounded in something that could actually happen, and then it kind of, you know, it just flows a bit better. How to plan your answer. You've got to plan your answer. Oh my God. I can always tell when someone has not planned it, because it's just chaos. Their links between the paragraphs are really weird. Sometimes the paragraphs are really short because they realize they started it, they thought they had a good point, and actually it turned out they didn't have a good point at all. So always plan. And what you're looking for in a plan is to come up with all of your possible talking points. You might not even use all of them, but the plan, nothing can go wrong in a plan. You can't do anything incorrectly in a plan. It's just ideas. So you want to get as many things on the page in a plan as possible and then sort through which will work best together. So come up with 3 or 5 talking points. You might not use them all. Work out what statistics would support those talking points, as I said a moment ago. Do it in note form. Do it in a mind map. Go through your talking points. That would be really, really helpful for you to kind of get the ideas out of your head, look at them objectively in your planning section, and then decide, okay, that's going to be good first, then I'll move on to that, and then that. Your writing will have so much more clarity. I think people are worried about planning because they realize, well, they know, and it is a fact, you don't get marks for your plan. And so people feel like it's a waste of time. They're like, oh, I should definitely just start writing because I'm only going to get marks for what I write, which is true, but the quality of the writing is so much better with a plan. I genuinely believe I could actually work out whether someone has done a plan or not. Here's just an example of a plan. So this is actually a plan that I did with a student of mine. The question was, a magazine is inviting readers to send in articles with the title, My Hopes and Ambitions for the Future. Write the article that you would submit. So he came up with 3 talking points. His first one, current hopes and ambition. And what he wrote is in black and what I added was in red. So basically he showed me the plan and all the points were really short and undeveloped. So in red, I asked questions of that bullet point to basically coax more information out of him. And it really worked. And I would recommend, don't just write a short sort of plan with really short points. Actually try and develop each one a little bit. So for example, his current hopes and ambition was to get better at boxing. That's all he wrote. And so I added in, well, what would the benefit be in the future if you got better at boxing? Because of course that's the title, isn't it, of the speech, your hopes and ambitions for the future. So rather than just get better at boxing, in the heat of the exam, when you start writing it, when you look back at your notes, you're like, well, that doesn't help me. I don't know why, what would getting better at boxing do for me? So write it, work it out in your plan, and then you don't have to worry about it in the heat of the moment. Then he said, just this point, get better by training hard. So I added in, well, how can others have a better future based on that idea? And what advice could you give about training hard? He then came up with an idea, hope for crime to go down. And then he said, less theft and stabbing. And I was like, but I don't know, that's not going to help you. When you look at that in your exam and you're on your second paragraph now, that's not going to help you. You're going to be like, oh, what did I mean by stabbing? What do I want to say about stabbing? So in red, my follow-ups of how I think you could get more detail into the plan. What's damaging about theft? Obvious question, but write it down. What are the statistics? Make them up. What steps need to be taken to reduce knife crime? And what are some facts about knife crime? Now, if you write that into your plan, you don't have to worry about any of it. When you're actually writing a paragraph, you can just look at your plan and go, oh, came up with a statistic, came up with some facts. Brilliant, let's bang it in. Hope for less poverty, job opportunities. And I added, he just said job opportunities. I added in, well, what does a good job opportunity look like? What job would you like and why? If you just write job opportunities in your plan, you're just going to be like, I don't know what to do with that, job opportunities. But what if you wrote down, my top job would be this, and this is why I would like it? If you wrote that in your plan, that's really easy to write a paragraph based on that, or half a paragraph. Peaceful society, I said, how do you achieve that? Economic growth, I said, how would you achieve that? And what are the benefits of a strong economy? Maybe you could use some facts and a statistic. He said, less corrupt government. I said, well, but how would that benefit people in the future? And how would we achieve a less corrupt government? So all of that could, on a mind map, be sort of like exploded off. I call it like exploding off of the point. If your point is economic growth, off of that, an offshoot could be, well, economic growth would mean we all get paid more, maybe so we can afford more. Economic growth means that there's more money for like social services and stuff like that. So really, you want to try and develop your points in your plan as much as possible, whilst also not taking up too much time. So I'm going to go over a full mark example now. I say full mark, it's probably like a level 6, it's top level. It might not be very full mark, but it's very, very good from an ex-student of mine called Emma. So the question was, our addiction to cheap clothes and fast fashion means young people in poorer countries have to work in terrible conditions to make them. We must change our attitude to buying clothes now. Write an article for a magazine or website. So in your head, you're now thinking, right, informal. Is it to entertain? Not really. It's about young people in poor countries working in terrible conditions. Okay, cool. So it's not about being entertaining, but it is perhaps about using some lighter language, which we'll see in Emma's answer. We need a title. We want subheadings. I wonder what the objective might be that she's chosen. Let's have a look. The title, Clothing Causes Social Chaos, and we might not even know it. Look at that alliteration in the title. Clothing causes social chaos. It's got such a nice ring to it. Immediately, it's way more enticing. I'm actually looking forward to reading this now. And it feels well thought out too. Alliteration, you've actually got to think about the words you're going to use. So that immediately puts me on the side of Emma. Open your wardrobe and you'll likely see a stack, if not a drawer, full of t-shirts. There are one or two that are washed thin and on the verge of fraying. Some slightly faded graphic tees who have clearly seen better days, and that one shirt you bought at a museum which still has a tag on it. Like the use of different punctuation. That's really good because you're getting marks on your variety of punctuation, so that's good. Next year, a fourth of the contents of this drawer will be gone. And also, I didn't mention, look at that direct address, literally in the first sentence. Open your wardrobe. I'm pretty sure we all have a wardrobe. So immediately it's like, oh yeah, in a wardrobe, I probably do have some really, really old clothes that I've not really worn much. So immediately brings us into the world, the story. We are now part of it. Next year, a fourth of the contents of this drawer will be gone, replaced with new, vibrant, flashy t-shirts. It will lay in a pile consisting of its similar brethren or brothers. Nice bit of metaphor here. Dresses, skirts, trousers, and the occasional pair of jeans. Bit of a list. And haunting this pile, metaphor, of discarded clothing, nice ambitious vocabulary, is the hard work and sweat of hundreds of workers. Bit of an idiom, hard work and sweat. Their lives ignored and disregarded by the very people who encourage it, which is us. Your t-shirt, more direct address, likely started its journey somewhere in India, where young children no older than 10 wade up and down sweltering cotton fields day in, day out, painstakingly picking cotton buds with their calloused hands. Calloused, nice, ambitious vocabulary, nice alliteration, painstakingly picking. Once the basket is full, they bring it to the main building, where one of their friends, of similar age, nice parentheses, the two commas there separating that clause out, carefully separates the fluff from the seeds one by one before it is sent to the mill and shipped to Bangladesh, now as a fully formed sheet of fabric. Great. Kind of getting quite descriptive. I like it. A little girl unloads the fabric from the truck and brings her box into a tall, formidable building. Nice, changing the tone now. Formidable, ambitious vocabulary, making us feel like this place is an uncomfortable place, this building. She sits down at her desk, row 64, column 5, and begins to sew the fabric into the earliest form of your t-shirt. Think how clever that is, your t-shirt. Direct address, putting us in the spotlight. Her movements are calculated, precise, clearly honed from months, if not years, slaving away at her rickety wooden desk in a sea of other girls and women in this crumbling concrete building. Wow, Absolutely fantastic. So much to deal with there. Rickety, ambitious vocabulary. Sea of other girls. Nice metaphor, making it feel like there's loads of girls in this factory making clothes. Crumbling concrete building. Lovely alliteration. Really descriptive as well. The bell rings at 9 in the evening. Simple sentence. The girl packs up her tools, deposits her work into the collection bins, headed to the nearest retail store near you. Again, direct address. We are part of the problem here. She's been really clever in that. And trudges to her dormitory. Trudges, ambitious vocabulary. Along with the horde of slow-moving, exhausted workers. As soon as you read horde, you think of like zombies. And that's, of course, exactly what she wants to communicate. Coughing is rife. Ambitious vocabulary. And she thinks of herself as lucky that she hasn't caught anything yet this year, but living with 16 other people crammed into metal bunks and sharing one bathroom with the whole floor makes the incoming sickness unable to dodge. Building sympathy in this descriptive storytelling. Remember, she's made all of this up. She has made this up. And immediately I'm brought into the world of this made up girl who's working in a factory. The question was only about fast fashion. And yet she's made this into a piece of writing that makes us care about the people in it, which immediately makes it more impactful and more interesting. Hopefully you agree. She can only hope that the coughing doesn't turn into something worse. Last year, a girl from her room had come down with a cough. The next day, she hadn't arrived at her desk when the morning bell rang. Whoa, okay. Really bringing in some emotions to this now. Obviously implying here that maybe the girl who got ill, maybe she died, maybe she ended up in hospital, who knows. But again, it like makes us suddenly sympathize with these workers, which of course was the point of the question. Young people in poorer countries working in terrible conditions. Emma, this student of mine, has taken all of that, made it into a story to then use to make us feel something about fast fashion. 2 days later, a new girl took over her old desk. Lovely one-line paragraph to really make it stand out. A subheading, wait, am I the problem? Rhetorical question, bringing us back into like the story in the world of like, how am I complicit in this? Every time you buy a t-shirt from your general retail store, every time you decide that your t-shirt has served its purpose and turn to throw it away, there is a boy in a cotton field, a boy in the sorting house, a girl in the factory, and countless other faceless people whose lifestyles you have encouraged. Loads of direct address, nice bit of listing, bringing in the idea of young people, the boy, the girl working in the factory. With fast fashion culture more popular than ever, name brands from Zara to H&M alike, so using real brands that would resonate with us, alike mass producing tens of thousands statistic of clothing per season, consumerism is also at a new high, ambitious vocabulary. And it is your consumerist mindset, direct address, your disregard for the lives that continue this vicious cycle of low costs and high prices. I know she took that from an Inspector Calls. We mindlessly exploit ambitious vocabulary and oppress those who cannot afford to speak up every day without a single thought. Very like the inspector from an Inspector Calls. Man is a greedy, selfish being. One-line paragraph. So much power to that. Greedy, selfish. And we know she's talking about us because it's had direct address all the way through. So it suddenly makes us feel like we are greedy and we are selfish. Every year, the average person purchases 25 pieces of new clothing. She's made that up. If not, more. And 2,000 tons of fast fashion ends up in landfill sites. She's made those statistics up, but it really helps to make her point that we're throwing away too many clothes. We should think about the people that have worked hard to make that piece of clothing. This number is rising higher and higher as time goes on, even in the light of recent boycotting of certain brands due to their unethical treatment of workers. And think about what I just said there as well, her objective. It feels like her objective here was to make us think about the people involved in making the clothes. It's not just a piece about why fast fashion is bad. It's more about why should we care? And that was her objective, and I think that comes across really, really strongly. These brands claim they have changed, and we have returned to our mindset of mindless consumption, nice alliteration. But have the lives of the exploited really changed? Nice rhetorical question. Does the boy have the same access to his basic rights like sanitation and education? Another rhetorical question. Does the girl now have a stable accommodation where she does not have to live with 20 other people she doesn't know away from her family? Rhetorical question, bringing in back this idea about young people being exploited. This is the impact of fast fashion, of our choices and decisions which we must change. We are the feeders of the cycle. Nice metaphor. This cycle exists because of us. Nice use of a dash. Again, varied punctuation. It is up to us to change for the cycle to break, so that the hundreds of millions of children out there have the ability to access a life which they deserve. Here's the call to action. I, for one, am making the change today. I cannot live with the torment of my past decisions. Nice hyperbole. Supporting essentially a trade in blood, sweat and tears. Idiom. Ask yourself, can you live with knowing what your addiction really costs? She's used that from the statement, I think, addicted to fast fashion or something like that. Rhetorical question. The lives you upend just so you can own something a little bit newer, a little bit brighter, a little bit cooler. Lovely use of tricolon and anaphora there. Very, very, very good. So powerful to use a tricolon and anaphora. If you can't, then I suggest you make the change too. Boom. So powerful. Would work as a speech as well. This is why I was thinking, would I give it 4 marks? I don't know. Did it feel enough like a magazine? But honestly, who cares? It's so powerful. It's so well thought through. It's so clear. She's used direct address all the way through. She's used rhetorical questions to keep it engaging. She's used descriptive writing and clever vocabulary as well. She's used that like story of someone to get us like connected emotionally to the story. It's a phenomenal piece of writing. And out of 40, I would 100% be giving it level 6, like anywhere from sort of 24 to 30 marks. I would probably give it like 28. Why wouldn't I give it 30? I don't know. Just, I think me and a lot of examiners maybe also feel like, if we're going to give it 30 out of 30, it's got to be the best thing I've ever written. I think it's actually pretty good. And mostly when I show this to new students of mine, they read that. They're very, very surprised that came from like a 15-year-old girl. And Emma went on to get grade 9s in language and literature. So she was definitely like a talented student. But what she's really done there is actually just use those 6 tips that I've used. She's made the writing more interesting, more engaging. She's used that descriptive writing really well, creating that story. And you guys can do this too. If you go back through this video and maybe pause it on those 6 steps, write them down, practice them, get a load of past paper questions and just write a couple of paragraphs for each. So you're not doing a 45-minute piece of writing for each past question. That'll take you ages and ages and ages. But just try writing a couple of paragraphs. Practice planning. Practice doing a 5-minute plan for all the past papers you can find. And here's the thing, when you run out of past papers for your exam board, look at any other exam board because they all have this question and they all use the same formatting pretty much. So you'll have an unlimited amount of questions for the transactional writing or persuasive writing. So like put the time in and you'll get better at it. Use these steps and you will definitely get better at it. But anyway, I hope you got something out of that. If you stuck around to the end, thanks. I mean, that was a long one. Obviously, if you do have any questions, put them down below and I'll answer them. If you're a student of mine, then I will see you in the next lesson. Feel free to let me know you watched the video and what you thought of Emma's piece of writing there. And thanks so much, guys. Good luck with it. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.